Tina Desiree Berg reporting for Status Coup News. We are currently outside the Wayne facility. This is assembly parts for Ford, or assembly line, I should say, for Ford. We're waiting Biden coming to visit this today. He's going to talk to some strikers. In the meantime, I want to introduce you to a couple of Canadians that are here from the Canadian Union. Unifor, which is the Canadian Union, made a deal this past week with Ford to avert a strike. But you guys have been with the union out there for a while. I'm going to have them introduce themselves, give their backgrounds, and then we'll get some questions in.
I'm Sid Ryan, the past president of the Ontario Federation of Labour, representing roughly about 1 million workers in Ontario. So yes, you might be introduced to me first.
Yeah, James Moffat. I was the Sheet Metal Workers International, the business manager, financial secretary for our local union in Toronto. Been a union rep for over 20 years and retired now. We're down here to show a little bit of solidarity to the workers down here.
Right. So, you know, there's actually a lot of crossover between you folks and what in Michigan. It's right over the border. There's a bridge you take over. I know they get parts in, unifor parts. But before we get into that, tell me a little bit about the Ford deal that was solidified. You got your concessions right off the bat without having to go on strike.
Yeah, so basically they got a 3-year agreement. If you average it out, it's about 5% a year. It's 10% in the first year, 2% the second, and 3% in the third year. They got some bonuses, $10,000 up front. So all in all, for production workers, it works out to be about 15%. And for the skilled trades, it works out to be about 19% over 3 years. If you toss in vacations and add it all up, the union is saying it's basically about 25% total, right? But personally, myself, I believe they kind of undersold themselves a little bit in that they should have waited for the stronger union down here to settle their agreement prior to settling their own. There could be a lot of grief up in Canada if it turns out that there's a much better agreement down in the US than what they got, because the agreement only passed by 54%. So you can see the membership is divided primarily because they felt there was more on the table, and I have a sneaky suspicion that there is more on the table, but we will see when they settle here with Ford.
All right, that's fair enough. One thing that's a point of contention here in the United States that is less so in Canada is the CEO to worker ratios, right? So back in the late 70s, early 80s, you would see a ratio of like 20 to 1. Now it's like 399 to 1, 400 to 1. Ford, I think, is a little bit less, 280 to 1, something around there. But it is a problem. They keep giving them big bonuses, big increases at the top, and that absolutely comes at the cost to workers' pay. Does it, because a lot of these companies are now multinational, obviously Ford's doing business in Canada and the United States here. You have Stellantis that's headquartered over in Amsterdam, right? That was a conglomerate created out of an Italian-American company and a French company. So the way business is now, it's very much international. How do you think we address that?
Well, I don't know how, we address that at the bargaining table, basically, right? But the issue is not as burning of an issue in Canada. There, it's basically the concessions that we gave back in the 2008, 2009. I think Sean Fain probably did a better job of highlighting and publicizing the disparity between the CEOs and the workers, where it is now like 300, 400 times what the worker on the floor gets. 10 years ago it may have been 20 or 30 times. In Canada, they tend to focus much more on the profits that the corporations made and say, because of the profits that you've made and we actually helped you make those profits, we should be sharing in some of the wealth. That seems to be what was driving it much more so. Here, I think it's more personalized against the CEOs, maybe only because the CEOs are on CNN, Fox News, and they're out there trying to defend the indefensible. So the workers basically focus in on the CEOs as individuals. But, I mean, their wages, those salaries and bonuses are an absolute disgrace. I mean, it is pretty sickening to see people earning 300-400 times what the workers are earning, and then basically saying, oh, I get that because of the way the company is performing. Like, bullshit. What about the workers who actually made the product at the end of the day, right? So, yeah, I mean, it's but anyway, getting back to the question about how do you address that? I mean, I can only see it at the bargaining table and the strength of a strong union coming onto the picket line. which basically says, screw you, you won't make those profits. I mean, I like the line that they're using here. We will wreck your economy, not the economy of the average person in the US, but they'll wreck the billionaire's economy. And that's a great line because that strikes home with the workers.
Right.
Yeah.
Any thoughts to add to that?
I think the big thing for me coming down here is just to show a little bit of solidarity with our brothers and sisters, right? And you know, being from Canada, we're both retired. It's put me back to my grassroots again. You know, after my retirement, and you know, and this is a strong picket line. The morale is amazing. Every one of these picketers, and you know, they'll deserve every penny that they get for standing up, and I think they'll win in the end.
Yeah, no, I think they have the perseverance to win for sure, and they are still in good spirits. You mentioned the 2008-2009 bankruptcy deals. I want to go back and talk about that for a second. At the time, you know, Ford, these companies were looking at some problems. They were facing bankruptcy. They came to the UAW and said, please work with us. The UAW literally bailed them out.
The government. So the government bailed them out as well.
100%.
Yeah.
With no concessions attached to that. They promised that they would bring back all of the things they gave up. COLA, which is cost of living pay, you know, pension share, profit sharing, things of this nature. Not only did that stuff not come back, the tiers are more ingrained than they ever have been. We have been speaking to workers that are working as temporary workers 5 years, 7 years. Yeah. They're still temporary. We have spoken to some workers that have been able to switch from temporary to full-time permanent, and they're taking cuts in pay to do so. So there's legitimate beefs to be had here. What are your thoughts on that?
I think you've put your finger right on it. I think that's what's driving this strike and driving the unhappiness in Canada with the deal with Ford, and that is the unfairness of it all. To go to a table and say, help us, bail us out, and we give up major concessions, COLA, pensions, bringing in 2 tiers, exploiting workers basically. But they promised them, we will pay you back. If you do this for us now, we will pay you back. And they reneged on that deal. And we all know what happens when you renege on a deal. You piss people off to no end. And this is the result of it. You get a strike. So I think even that's driving it more than what the corporate profits were. Not the profits, but what the CEOs are earning. I believe it's the unfairness of it all. And that's where I think there's a lot of uneasiness in Canada over the settlement, because they felt we didn't get back nearly as much as we gave to the corporations, and now was our time to do it. And now that Canada and the US are potentially on strike at the same time, they feel that the Canadians should have gone out on strike, and they should have held out, or else they should have held back maybe and waited for the US, the UAW to settle. You know. So anyway, but it's the unfairness of having given it. Jimmy said the government bailed them out. I don't think so. It was the taxpayers. Yeah, it was the average. Yeah, it was the average. Yeah. You know, punter is the one that actually bailed them out. So they got money off the taxpayers, and they got money off the workers, and now they're stuffing it into their pockets, and they're making $250 billion in the last 6 months alone. And these bastards are turning around and telling the workers on the picket line, "Then sorry, we can't address your concerns." No. I hope they stay out as long as it takes to get whatever it is that they want.
Right on.
You endorse that?
Oh, yeah, I endorse that 100%, Tina. Oh.
So let me ask you.
That's why we're here. That's why we're down here. Show our solidarity.
Let's talk about 2014 period of time there, that negotiation. That was really terrible because now we have a couple of UAW bosses that were taking bribes from the auto manufacturers to return some really shitty contracts, and then to basically say to the membership, we're not going to get a better one, just vote yes, when in reality they had been taking money from these guys, bribes, whatever, apartments in Florida, you know, all these things. Luckily, the government went after them. Some of them are serving felony sentences for violations of the Taft-Hartley Act. But in the meantime, these guys suffered under those contracts and just making what was bad in 2008 even worse, I think, in many ways. And now these companies are incredibly profitable on top of it. So what are your thoughts? You were there during that period of time. Did that bleed up into Canada as well?
I was absolutely disgusted. I mean, as a union leader, a cardinal sin is to take a bribe and basically screw your own members. These guys took money to stuff into their own pockets and enrich themselves and their families, knowing full well that they were being paid by these workers earning $15 an hour, 2 tiers, it takes them 8 years to get to the top, peanut wages, and they kept them in that trap, basically, of a 2-tier system because they took a bribe from the company. I mean, that is absolutely disgusting. And
Utter betrayal. That's worse than being a scab.
Yeah.
In my opinion, I mean, it's the utter betrayal. A union leader, he's supposed to be there representing his mentor. He like his whole being when you represent a union is to represent your members, right? Not to side with the employer and take bribes. It's the element betrayal, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, it's bad. I want to talk about politics for a second here in the United States and what a mess we have. It's quite different from Canadian politics. Actually, before I get into this, let me ask you a quick question on Medicare for All. You have universal coverage in Canada.
Right.
The United States does not. We have this messy piecework, profiteering from insurance companies, for-profit you name it. It's a mess.
Right.
I do think that the unions have been a little bit slow to embrace this idea of universal health care because they think they can use having health care as a bargaining chip to not only unionize shops that aren't union yet, but also to offer workers something when they do join the union, because the health care that a union member gets is 100% better than what you're going to get otherwise. But I also think that these things are becoming so expensive now. You're starting to see what we've seen in the broader economy. So we're talking about, deductibles of $1,500, co-pays of so you get nickel and dime to the point where you can't even go see the doctor even if you have.
Right.
So what is your thoughts on that? Should American labor embrace this idea of having universal health care?
Absolutely, 100%. Believe me, there's a lot of propaganda here in the US about the Canadian system. Look, it's not perfect, but I can tell you, in the last, couple of years, I've had MRIs, CT scans, I've had probes up my butt, down my throat. You know what I mean? I've had it all done, and all free, and all of it in a reasonable period of time. So I cannot understand why anybody in the United States, unless, of course, you're buying into the propaganda from the pharmaceutical companies and others, the insurance companies, who are basically saying, oh, you can't go there, that's socialism. This is bullshit. Like, seriously. So anyways, no, it's a brilliant system. It is the way to go. Nobody in Canada is in fear of getting cancer, serious health problems. Sure, you may go to the emergency ward if you have to go there and wait a couple of hours, but by and large, it is a great system. I don't know why they haven't bought into it.
Not only that, they've introduced dental care. As part of, they're bringing that in, and the NDP, the left party up there, is pushing Trudeau now to bring in pharmacare.
Pharmacare.
So everything can be universal, right?
Right.
And at the end of the day, like Sid said it all, you can go to a doctor. You don't have to worry about paying out of your pocket. Not only that, but the unions, what they do, at least my union, our benefit package, we would top up.
Oh, okay.
Like, for an example, our dental plan, right? So we'd pay into a dental plan to top things up for eye care. We'd top it up other than what the universal one. So it made it better. The argument down here during the last election was that why would we buy into the universal care when the auto workers have it? When all the unions have it, why would we pay again for that? Well, all the union and the manufacturing places, have those benefit packages, but we still get universal health care.
Here's the other big issue that they argue in Canada, at least the Auto Workers Union argue, because we have universal health care paid for by the government, through the taxpayers, it costs $7 per hour less to make a car than what it would be otherwise, because these guys here are going to factor that in. So potentially you could be getting higher wages if they would buy into a universal program, because the company will pay for the government is paying for the health care, and that frees up that $7 an hour to put into wages for the workers.
Yeah, I often have thought that myself, is shouldn't the union be focusing on getting better wages, and not have to worry about this, because and American healthcare, the system right now is just untenable. It's insane. Like, it's
now that they're out on strike, I believe that they stopped the benefits, right?
Yes.
So the company is in control of your benefits, whereas with a universal system, you go on strike and you can still go to the hospital, still go to the doctor, still get your medical services, right? So
It's the rich that doesn't want it.
Right.
They're rich because they can pay for it.
Right.
It's a poor working guy that gets shafted all the time.
It's usually generally the case that it's the wealthy elites that don't want something like this because they have the benefit right now, as you say, of being able to have quality care that they can afford at any time. They don't want to have to shoulder the burden as in their minds for other folks because it's a universal program. And the reality too, I would add to that, is universal programs generally, once they get instated, they don't go away because they have universal buy-in, right? If you just tailor a program to a certain segment of the population, it tends to get eaten alive because it's easy for rich people to say, like, well, we don't get it, they don't get it, you should be pissed that guy's got a handout and you don't.
That's right. So every time there's a benefit of a universal program, there's an element of society to turn around and say, well, why are we giving this benefit, of $300 a week to the rich? Say, no, we want everybody to have it. Exactly. So as we can't water it down because eventually you'll end up chipping away at it. The other thing about over here as well with the healthcare plan, let's say with the automakers, they will start putting in co-user fees. Charging you $1,500 a year deducted from your paycheck to pay for that healthcare program. So eventually they chip it away at us.
They 100% do.
And so the richest country in the world, and some of these picketers walking the picket line, right? Can't afford to go to a doctor.
No, they can't.
The richest country in the world.
How insane is that?
That's insane.
It is beyond insane. This is what I call false scarcity. The money exists in this country for sure. It's just, what are our priorities?
Yeah.
And the reality is our government has been bought and paid for by the wealthy elites, what I call the plutonomy in this country. Right. And that transcends both parties, unfortunately, although one is worse than the other, and we're going to talk about that next. Obviously, Biden's coming here today, our current president. And then we have Cornel West, who is running as a Green Party. He'll be here tomorrow.
Right?
Yeah, so you can come by and talk to him here at Wayne. Yeah,
brilliant. Okay.
And then Donald Trump, the ex-president, will be at, I don't want to talk about this, he's going to a non-union outfit in Clintonship. So this Drake Enterprises non-union outfit, and he's going to try to address UAW workers from a non-union outfit. The idea, he's trying to make the case that he's pro-labor. I don't see how you see it. I want to read this quote to you. Hang on, I got to take my glasses off here. Glasses are for far away. This is what Donald Trump had to say about the 2008-2009 bailout. Unions get their little 5%. They get another 2%. They get another 3%, 4%. All of a sudden, they're making more money than the people that own the company. That is a direct Trump quote. This was made 2 weeks after the UAW made massive concessions to the Big Three back in 2008. What is your reaction to that?
Well, it's part of the propaganda. I mean, the guy is a master at spinning, projecting. He says the things that he doesn't necessarily believe in, but he believes that the folks listening to him will in fact buy into it. So he's a master at getting people to believe the opposite of what he actually believes in himself, right?
He's a con man. That's what he is, I think.
Listen, I agree with you. A part of his messaging when he first campaigned the first time against Hillary Clinton back in 2016, he ran as a populist, right? I feel your pain. I get the working class in this country. I'm going to do something to change that. We're going to stop outsourcing jobs. This was a lot of the rhetoric that he used, but we've now had, 4 years of him as a president, and he has a track record that we can absolutely judge him on. And he didn't stop the outsourcing. The outsourcing continued at the same pace, more or less. So that was a lie. He's done nothing pro-labor necessarily. I mean, the fact that he's going to go speak at a non-union, he's fine with right to work. So there's no way that I don't think anybody can look at this guy as a president and think that he's pro-labor at this point, but there are union members that think Trump is still their guy, for whatever reason. Having said that, let's talk about Biden for a minute. So now Biden, definitely more pro-labor than Trump will ever be. I agree, I will give that. But however, what has he actually also done for the unions? So the PRO Act here in the United States, this was a pro-labor bill that labor was asking for. One of the things that would do is eliminate the problems with right to work, i.e. You have non-union members benefiting from union contracts. they're not paying in their dues. The reason right to work became a thing in the United States is because rich people wanted a way to bankrupt the unions so that they wouldn't have the money to fund strikes, like a strike fund and whatnot. I don't think that's a controversial statement, what I'm saying right now. But when when Biden had control of both chambers of Congress, it passed through the House, it went on through, it didn't pass the Senate. So the argument we constantly hear from the Democrats is that they must have a filibuster-proof bill, otherwise it's not going to pass because the GOP is going to block it. That is true, I will grant that, they will block it. But however, at the same time, they don't want to do anything about eliminating the filibuster. So now we just get in this endless cycle. Yeah. So I think Sean Fain is right when he takes the stance. They did endorse Biden in 2020. And now he's basically saying, I'm not going to give our endorsement to anybody that's not actually going to do something for us. This isn't about photo ops. This isn't about lip service. We need actual action in this country to help labor. So digesting all of that, what are your thoughts there?
I actually love his position because Labour should not be willy-nilly just be giving our endorsement over to any politician unless they walk the talk. And in Biden's case, it's all rhetoric. He hasn't walked the talk. Sure, okay, so there are a couple of states where they dealt with the right to work legislation, but by and large, he's not delivered for Labour in any significant way. So I agree with Sean Fain. I think you've got to show, coming to the picket line today, again, it's a step that no president has ever taken, so that's kind of groundbreaking and does send a signal. But at the end of the day, look, you've got two right-wing parties in this country who are basically funded by corporations and wealthy folks. And so therefore, when we had the two houses in government, the reason they didn't pass the legislation was because they're both being basically funded by the same corporations. They weren't going to piss those folks off. So what did they do? They pretend. It's all rhetoric. It's like Trump. He pretends that he's, give you an example with Trump. He says that we're going to put tariffs on the stuff coming in from China because we're going to bring back all these. Now, if you actually dig deep into that and you say, wait a minute, it's the Americans are paying for those tariffs because you import here into the US and you put a 15% tariff. That means it's more expensive for folks in the US to buy those products. But he's spinning it out that I got something like $15 billion off of the Chinese that we're now giving to the farmers in Iowa. I don't know why the media doesn't just dig a little bit deeper and say, hey, wait a minute.
Some of us do.
I'm talking about the mainstream media.
Yeah.
Because those tariffs are being paid for by the U.S.
No, you're right on there. So the manufacturers continue to outsource jobs, get the benefit of chasing cheaper labor across the globe, and then the consumer pays a higher price. And then, because we have to make the circle complete, then they put out the rhetoric that union workers are what's hurting the consumer by going on strike. I kid you not. So that's now the line they're using. That this right here, right now, which is nonsense to me. So my idea is this, and I think you folks do this in Canada a little bit, and we don't do it at all in the United States. Why is our government giving loans to Ford, giving loans to any company, quite frankly, without strings attached? If they're going to give $30 billion loan to a corporation, there should be some strings attached, and maybe some of those strings are...
I write a lot of stuff.
Look what happened in Oshawa, the GM plant. You should explain that to Tina.
Which?
The GM plant, how the government bailed them out and then they shut her down and then they open it up again.
Yeah, but
open it up again.
But they're doing exactly the same in Canada. I mean, they just gave $13 billion to Volkswagen to open up battery plants in southern Ontario. And they did that because Biden has this infrastructure program and his Buy America campaign, and he's basically giving money to the corporations up here. So they actually ended up having to up the ante in Canada to give them more than what Biden was giving them, so they'll bring the plants to Canada instead. And so when you work it out, it's something like it's $400,000 to $500,000 per job. And they pay the workers like $30,000 a year. So it's absolutely, and so you know what I mean. So it's crazy. So they're doing the same in Canada. Sometimes they will put strings attached. They will say you have to keep the plant open for so many years. But there's been so many violations of those kinds of agreements that they have no teeth in the legislation. They can't go after the corporations to get their money back when they shut down the plants. And that's what they did. They did in Oshawa, the area where I live. There's a big GM plant. General Motors after driving down the wages and hiring all these temporary staff. So they lay off everybody. They lay off all the legacy workers earning $30 an hour, shut down for 2 years, and now they've just opened up again last year and bringing all those same workers back for $15 an hour.
$15 an hour. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is outrageous. So I would thought maybe things were a little bit better up in your end. So it's about the same. The corporations, they play countries against each other too, as you said. Like, we'll give you more to open a plant here than what, the Biden administration.
We'll move it to Mexico. I mean, that's the big thing. And you hear Trump is using it as well. He's saying, oh, the electric cars, they're going to be built in China. Right? Yeah. Well, that's not true, but this is what he's saying, and people will believe that. These folks in this picket line, they'll believe that.
Yeah, the unfortunate reality is he's starting to turn EV into a talking point only because he's anti-environmental protections. I don't think he has any consideration whatsoever to do with labor, when in reality, all of these American auto workers eventually will be working on EV vehicles as well, and those plants need to be transitioned into union jobs. So that's what needs to be focused on, not this other rhetoric.
The entire world is moving to EVs.
Yeah.
I mean, Germany's basically saying we're going to ban the internal combustion engine by the year 2035. The whole world will be electrified in terms of their automobiles. And what Trump is saying is we'll be a little island here. We'll be all driving around internal combustion engines, polluting the world. Like, it's just a joke.
It's a joke, and there's no reason why these EV plants should not be union. He's trying. My opinion is he knows that, and he's trying to prevent it because his corporate donators don't want those plants to be union. So Sean Fain is working on what he calls a just transition. He recognizes that. I think anybody with a brain recognizes that. So it seems silly that Trump is trying to, and the GOP is trying to use that as a talking point. I think it's mainly because they want the plants to be non-union, A, and B, they're also against doing anything about climate change.
He's poisoning the well also, because he's poisoned the minds of these workers who's are basically being told, if you move towards EVs, you're going to be out of a job because they're going to build them in China.
Yeah, it's bad. It's not true. It's nonsense. Having said that, though, Ford has now halted the building of an EV plant here locally yesterday in the middle of all this. I was surprised by that. I'm not sure what the play is there. It might be something going on behind closed doors during negotiations.
It's all about the negotiations. So basically it'll be like that. He did it in Canada. I understand at the bargaining table they basically said to the Canadians, Ford said to the Canadians, take this offer back to your members, and if you reject it, we're taking the plant out of Canada. So here they're saying the same thing. They're basically saying we were going to build a plant here, but now it's off. But if you take this settlement, I bet you that part of it will be, we'll build this plant.
Yeah. And wildly, Ford was the first one to come back with a legitimate, something they can start with to bargain from, a legitimate agreement. They said, yes, we will bring back COLA. We understand that's a problem. We'll get rid of the tiers, 90-day transition from part-time to full-time. They also added the ability to strike at plant closures. Let's talk about the plant closure a little bit more. You mentioned this one in Canada, the GM thing. Another thing that's happening here is, so there was a plant, parts plant called Belvedere that was outside of the Chicago area in Illinois that they closed down a couple years back. Now, believe it or not, they're threatening to close down some plant distribution facilities here to move them back to Belvedere. We were at one of them yesterday, Marysville. It's a very profitable plant. Makes, millions of dollars a year. The profit margin's 30-40%. This sounds like craziness to me. Is it just a threat tactic to try to get God knows what?
Parts around. Hey? Just kind of moving the parts around. They try to defeat the workers in one plant, and they threaten them, well, we're going to close her down and shift it over here. That's what they're doing.
I don't know the logic of that, though. If it's within the country, I can see if they're moving it from here to Canada or moving it from here to Mexico, that's a real threat. But if you're just moving it from one community to the next, and UAW are still representing them, sorry?
They'll get out of their collective agreement then. They'll impose a lesser collective agreement.
I imagine they're still unionized, right?
Yeah, still unionized. I mean, it's a very weird thing. Speaking of Canada, so there's this company, Midwest. I don't know, are you familiar with Midwest? So at the plant yesterday, there was a lot of Midwest trucks that were trying to cross a picket line to get into that facility. I was told by some of the workers that this is a Canadian company. The reason they had switched to this during the strike is because the Teamsters won't cross the picket line. They had been using UPS as a Teamster run outfit, and they were like, yeah, we're not doing that. So they hired this Canadian company that was bringing trailers in.
A trucking company like Midwest?
Yeah, trucking company.
Oh, yeah. I know that the trucking companies in Canada mainly are not unionized. I know there's been a drive afoot to try to get them organized. So no, I wouldn't be in the least bit surprised if they've hired a non-union company to bring them in. Yeah, I mean, I see the trucks coming in here, and they're not very friendly. The guys are giving them the finger out of the trucks and honking the horns and bumping the workers on the picket line. But I don't understand why they don't close these picket lines down. They're supposed to hold them back at least 5 minutes. They're letting them in after a minute or two.
Well, because they got in trouble the other day. They were holding them off, and then there was some squabbling about legal this, legal that. So I think they don't, obviously don't want to hinder any.
Right, I guess, man.
Welcome to the United States of America, Canadian friends. One last question, because I think this is part and parcel to the conversation, and it has to be dealt with and discussed, is NAFTA. You guys are both old enough as I am to remember NAFTA. This was a bill started by a Republican president. He could not get it pushed through. Next, we have a Democratic president that comes in office and pushes it right through. I think NAFTA absolutely was like ground zero for so many of the problems we have with outsourcing now. And I also think that Americans need to realize that Mexico didn't benefit from NAFTA, it harmed them as well. Canada didn't benefit from NAFTA, it harmed them as well. When I say harm them, I mean workers. The only people that benefited were the corporations.
Absolutely.
What are your thoughts on NAFTA?
Oh Jesus! I fought against it. I fought against it when it was the free trade agreement of the Americas. It was only between Canada and United States. So we fought against that. It was 1988, and then of course it morphed into the North American Free Trade Agreement. Now, we got a lot of experience fighting that. So I was part of a whole movement that was in South America. We were fighting against the free trade agreement that Bush tried to bring in for all of the Americas, right? The FTAA. So anyway, we fought against that.
That was right.
President.
So that's George Bush Sr. we're talking about.
Yeah. Was it? I'm not sure. Was it 2002, 2003?
Oh, no, then that was W.
Yeah, it was W. Bush. Yeah, he's the one that was pushing it. Yeah, no, because I was down in Argentina.
Oh, that's right. The bone convention or whatever.
Yeah, and he was out in his ship out in the ocean, and what's his name from Venezuela? Is it Chavez?
I can't remember. Was it Chavez?
Yeah, Hugo Chavez. Hugo Chavez was staying in the hotel across the street from us, and he was coming out onto the street, meeting everybody, greeting. He was like a hero, right? And Bush was out on a ship in the ocean. He had to come in by helicopter because he wasn't safe, right? Yeah. But anyway, so we went into a massive big park in Argentina, and Mar del Plata, and what do you call it? Chavez made a speech that the free trade of the Americas is now dead, and it was. They killed it there and then, right? So, getting back to the free trade, North American Free Trade Agreement, that's been detrimental to workers in Canada. Again, because they're shifting stuff back and forth to tread at the bargaining table if you don't like it, right? And then, of course, there's multinational corporations coming in and are allowed to bid on, let's say, if you're in the educational sector. So, the printing of materials and books for all the schools. Before that was automatically going to a Canadian company, Canadian workers, and so now you have to compete against, companies from the US, companies from Mexico, and you cannot favour them in your bidding process. You cannot favour the Canadian company. It has to be opened up, right? So we lost like thousands of jobs in every sector back and forth. And we may have won a few from down here as well. I wouldn't think very many. But no, here's what we did lose. The manufacturing base in Canada was absolutely decimated because most of the corporations, I used to work in a nuclear power plant at one time, so all the turbines and all the big pumps and all the massive pieces of equipment was all manufactured through a parent company in Canada. The company was owned down in the United States, and the deal was at the time, even in the auto sector, was if you want to build cars in Canada, you've got to have factories in Canada, and you can sell your cars into Canada without any tariffs. The same thing with all the manufacturing, all that equipment. But as soon as we signed the free trade agreement, NAFTA, all those companies went back into the United States and they shipped the parts up already made into Canada. So we lost like tens of thousands of manufacturing jobs. Yeah.
Yeah. My sentiments exactly.
You endorse that?
I endorse it. You know what, Sid? That was a time we were all involved in fighting it, but yeah, no, but you said it. You said it well.
We tried to stop it back
Yeah.
then, and we didn't succeed, right? So
Yeah.
yeah.
But
Yeah, and here we are all these decades, years later, still filling.
But now it's on this bargaining table because they're basically saying, take this offer, and if you don't take it, we'll move the business down to Mexico.
you know what it boils down? It boils down to these workers. Who the hell do you think's building these cars in the plant? So it boils down to the workers.
Yeah.
No matter what industry they're in.